Sometimes you need a little help to stay ahead of the game. Like if your console gets fried during a power surge. Who could have seen that coming? You could say game over. Or you could choose USAA. With USAA Renter's Insurance, we'll help repair or replace your stuff. If you know, you know. If you don't, we do. Get your quote today at usaa.com/renters.
We're pleased to welcome you to the AUSA Noon Report, our virtual series featuring senior Army leaders, providing important updates on key defense topics. Our host today is AUSA's Vice President for NCO and Soldier Programs and the 15th Sergeant Major of the Army, Dan Dailey.
Good afternoon, and welcome to this edition of United States Army Association's Noon Report. We're very glad you've joined us today and appreciate your continued support for our programs and our events. I'd like to thank our sponsor, USAA, for their support of this edition of the Noon Report. USAA has been a national partner since 1998. We thank USAA for their tremendous support to the Army and AUSA. I'd like to welcome back our special guest, Command Sergeant Major Andrew Lombardo. He assumed duties as the 14th Command Sergeant Major of the United States Army Reserve in April of 2020. As the Command Sergeant Major of Army Reserve, Command Sergeant Lombardo is the senior enlisted advisor to the Chief of the Army Reserve on all enlisted matters. He enlisted in the United States Army in 1985, completing a 2-year tour with the United States Military Academy Police Company at West Point, New York, before leaving active duty to serve in the United States Army Reserve. Prior to his current assignment, Command Sergeant Major Lombardo served as the Command Sergeant Major of the 200th Military Police Command, and he holds a Master of Science degree at Administration of Justice from the University of Louisville. And in his civilian career, is a police executive who holds the rank of Deputy Inspector with the New York City Police Department. For more details on his many accomplishments and his awards and decorations, you can access Command Sergeant Major Lombardo's full bio in the handout tab in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. As a reminder, if you have questions for Sergeant Major Lombardo today, please use the Q&A tab and post your questions in the box at the lower right-hand side of your screen. We're going to do our best to get to as many questions as we have time for today, but start thinking about those questions as you join me in welcoming Command Sergeant Major Lombardo. Sergeant Major Lombardo, welcome back to the Noon Report.
Hey, thanks, Dan, SMA. It's great to see you again, and it's great to be back at AUSA headquarters. And I want to thank General Brown and the staff here at AUSA for giving me an opportunity to speak to our viewers today.
Well, I know our audience is looking forward to it, Sergeant Major, and it's always a pleasure to have you back. Tremendous feedback from your last visit. I know we're in store for a whole bunch more this time, so let's jump right in.
All right.
Sergeant Major of the United States Army National Guard was here just a few weeks ago, and he talked about the incredible mission that his soldiers did throughout a very challenging time, 2020 and again 2020 and 21.
Sure.
Pandemic, lots of going on. What's the Army Reserve been doing?
Hey, no, thanks. Appreciate that. So this has been a very busy year for America's Army Reserve. But before I get to that, I just want to hit the 800-pound goat in the room and just tip my hat off to Navy football.
Tough
weekend.
weekend.
And for a tough weekend
Tough
and a good game.
for us,
and looking
yeah.
forward to getting after it in 2022. I also, this is December 13th, and it's a pretty significant day, and it hasn't lost its impression upon me. It's the birthday of one of our components of the Army National Guard. They like to bill themselves as the oldest branch or the oldest component of the Army, whereas the Army Reserve is the youngest branch. So therefore, we're the most hippest. They're 383 years old and not looking a day older than 382. And I also want to, you mentioned Sergeant Major Sampa was here a couple of weeks ago. Great battle buddy of mine. I know he's got 35 years of service, and I believe this is going to be his last AUSA appearance because he'll be retiring in the spring. So I just want to say thank you for your service, brother. I love you, and you'll be missed. So yeah, so let's get to the Army Reserve. So 2021 started, middle of the pandemic. The Army Reserve, as the Federal Reserve of the Army, was heavily involved in the DoD's COVID response, or for response to COVID-19, specifically with logistical and medical support. And we mobilized over 4,500 soldiers across the United States to help with that effort. And really what it showed us as an organization is that we're responsive and we don't back down from adversity. And when the nation needs America's Army Reserve, we'll be there for the nation. You know, moving into, you know, our operational approach, and we'd like to say that the sun never sets on the Army Reserve. We're present in all 50 states, in 5 U.S. territories, and 26 countries around the world. There's an Army Reserve facility pretty close to your community. We've spent this year focusing on getting back to in-person training and specifically collective training. We've had a very busy summer getting after building cohesive and lethal teams. In addition to focusing on training to be prepared for what we might need to do, we've also deployed over 250 units, and at any given time, we have approximately 14,000 soldiers around the globe. If there's an Army soldier in a country, you could bet that there's an Army Reserve soldier right there with them. And perhaps most recently, we've been asked by the Army to help with Operation Allies Welcome. So we've mobilized over 1,500 soldiers to support the welcoming our allies at Fort McCoy and other locations around the United States.
Well, thank you, Sergeant Major. It sounds like the Army Reserve, just like our Guard and the Active Force,
Yeah, absolutely.
incredibly busy time, incredible mission they're accomplishing. You know, I'd be remiss, Sergeant Major, before we go on, I didn't take the opportunity to highlight the fact that both you and Sergeant Major Sampa wear two uniforms, as both a U.S. Army soldier, but also as an officer of the peace. I think it's befitting if we take an opportunity to give a shout out to the boys in blue. What do you think?
Absolutely. I'm incredibly grateful for my civilian employer, the New York City Police Department, the largest municipal police department in the United States. And I've actually had an opportunity to see our NYPD veterans march in the Veterans Day Parade as part of the reviewing stands. And I had an opportunity to take a photo with the NYPD leadership right on the red carpet in front of national TV. So just to my employers out there with the NYPD, thank you for your support of me and our fellow veterans for our dual service in both the military and protecting the citizens of New York City. Thanks.
Absolutely. And the Army has enjoyed a long relationship with the New York City Police Department. So hats off to the boys in blue in New York. Thanks for your service up there in the city. So, Sergeant Major, moving back to our questions, I know our audience is writing in. They have lots of questions, which we're going to get to, ladies and gentlemen. But I have a few more. You mentioned the people.
Yes.
It's all about people, and growing the force for the future obviously comes down to people. And as the Army Reserve, you know, their senior non-commissioned officer in charge, how are you leveraging those people, and how are you tying in the initiative, This Is My Squad?
Sure. No, thanks. So the SMA and I are united in This Is My Squad and changing the culture of both of our organizations. So we know in order to get after readiness, we have to place our people as our number one priority, and we're absolutely doing that. The SMA talks about the influences on a soldier's life and talks about creating the positive aspects of the squad. And he often talks about the golden triangle, right? Where the squad leader is the most influential soldier, leader in a soldier's life, as well as the battle buddy and the family members. So we just have to message it slightly different, take the same initiatives that the regular Army is using and tailor it to the citizen soldier, and recognize that over 92% of our force is a citizen soldier and has to maintain good civilian employment. So when we talk about This Is My Squad, we often depict it in terms of a golden diamond, where the employer is an important influencer on the Army Reserve soldier's life. And we have to recognize that through our People First initiatives.
So you talk people first, Sergeant Major. Chief Staff of the Army's big initiative, puts it up front in his priorities. What other initiatives is the Army Reserve doing to support the people first strategy?
Sure. Quite a bit, actually, and thanks for the question. So part of the People First initiatives gets after addressing harmful behaviors. And one particular harmful behavior that I wanted to focus on was suicide. And I know that keeps a lot of leaders awake at night. And I'm sure as your time in the SMA, it kept you up at night as well. So we recognize in the Army Reserve that most of our suicide ideations occur when a soldier's not in a duty status and when a leader's not in a duty status. So we had to take a hard look at how we get after this in a response format. So speaking with General Daniels, supported an initiative and signed a policy letter 2014, which deals with suicide ideations for soldiers that are in a non-duty status. And really what it does is where normally it would take days to place a soldier into some type of duty status to be able to either respond or to get them the help they need. This policy gives commanders the ability to, or non-commissioned officer to take immediate action, even in a non-duty status, by calling their leadership. And we've pushed it down to where the company commander and the first sergeant can verbally place that non-commissioned officer into a duty status if they're in a reasonable commuting distance in order to respond to get the soldier the help they need without having to ask for higher headquarters. This protects the soldier that responds, but maybe more importantly, what it does is it really empowers those junior leaders to make decisions and get soldiers the help they need. And, you know, as the creed says, we don't want to leave a soldier behind. And this is a policy that I think that gets after that. And I really appreciate the Association of the United States Army for giving me the opportunity to talk to our viewers about that, because I really need to publicize this, because if we could save one soldier's life as a result of this policy, I'll consider it successful.
Absolutely, Sergeant Major. Well, thanks for that important rundown. It sounds like People First strategy is alive and well in the Army Reserve.
Yes.
You know, at the 2021 annual conference, Sergeant Major, the Sergeant Major of the Army announced some issues and concerns they had with education and promotion. The pandemic has caused a lot of issues and slowed down the ability for people to get to school. And he announced that they're going to be authorizing temporary promotions.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Is the Army Reserve doing something like this?
Well, yeah. So the SMA is going to authorize temporary promotions, and the United States Army Reserve is going to provide some implementing guidance on the way we're going to do it, because it has to be tailored to our citizen soldier force. So for staff sergeants and promotions to sergeant and staff sergeant, we're going to centrally manage that. And we're going to tie it to vacancies as well as a reserve school seat. So if you have a reserve school seat, a vacancy within your local commuting distance, we'll temporarily promote those ranks, and you'll have 12 months to complete your required PME in order to retain that promotion. The same is going to happen for promotions to staff sergeant, for sergeant first class, and master sergeant. The only difference is it's going to be tied to the order of merit list, because like the regular Army, we've adopted the NCO evaluation board process. So it'll be a vacancy with a required reservation for a school seat, and you'll still maintain that 12 months to complete your military education. Now, for the Army Reserve, our military education for the advanced leader course and the senior leader course occurs in multiple phases. So in order to obtain that temporary promotion, you'll have to complete that last phase of education in that 12-month period.
Excellent.
And we think that's going to help us grow our much-needed non-commissioned officer course. So really looking forward to this. This is a bit of a scoop for AUSA. We should have this guidance out within the next few weeks, or at the very least early January.
Well, we'll be looking to help you promote that guidance and get it out there for you across
Great.
all of our platforms. So thanks for that great rundown, Sergeant Major. I just want to remind our audience too, you can ask questions by posting them on the Q&A tab. And we're going to get your questions after the final question I have for Sergeant Major. Sergeant Major, lifelong career as both a police officer and in the United States Army. Very successful, obviously, culminating it with being the Command Sergeant Major of the United States Army Reserve. What advice can you give a junior leader or a junior soldier about how to be successful in the Army Reserve? Sure.
So I'll tell you, let me start by saying what kept me in after I left the regular Army after a 2-year stint because I wanted to pursue a career with law enforcement. But I did not want to let go of the camaraderie that I felt by being a member of a team, and by my leaders that would challenge me and give me opportunities that I couldn't get elsewhere. And I'm really glad I did. And 35 years later, I'm still here. The advice that I would give is take a look at the policies and procedures that we're putting in place. We're putting forth a junior leader development program that lays out a specific path from how to get from a private to a non-commissioned officer, because we want to build the junior leaders for our force. And no longer do we want a promotion or a lateral appointment based upon personal preference. We created a system, the corporal policy, for example, which lays out specific criteria and milestones that a soldier needs to accomplish in order to get from a soldier to a non-commissioned officer. And it's pretty, you have to be an expert in your warrior tasks and battle drills. You have to complete your distributed leader course, be selected for promotion by a promotion board and attend the basic leader course. For the Army Reserve, if you meet those gates, when you attend one of our BLC courses or one of our NCO academies, you'll immediately laterally appointed upon completion of that basic leader course. And you'll have the opportunity to walk through the arches, knowing full and well that you've met all the criteria to be a non-commissioned officer, and you're well on your way to be a junior leader in our organization.
I appreciate that update, Sergeant Major. We're going to go out to our audience now. And our first question, Sergeant Majors, can you tell us about how you're going to operationalize TIMS through, and I think this is just a word on the street now, that there may be a best squad competition in 2022. And the second part of that question our audience has is there still going to be a best warrior competition in 2020?
Sure. Thanks for the question. So at the outset, what I want to say is the idea or even the notion of a best squad competition comes from SMA Grinston as a way to operationalize, this is my squad, to highlight the positive aspects of being a member of a squad. So he threw this gauntlet down early in 2020. And in recognition that the Army Reserve has a longer planning cycle and a preparation cycle, I wanted to challenge my staff to put forth a best squad competition in 2021. So we did so at Fort McCoy, Wisconsin back in May. And we had our 28 two-star level commands select 5 soldiers to compete at the best squad competition there. And in order to build those cohesive teams, it looked like any other competition with the Army Combat Fitness Test, 200 meter swim, weapons qualifications. What I also want to do is I wanted to tailor it to highlight the expert soldier badge tasks. Number one, because I think the Army Reserve is uniquely positioned to compete for that, since we're composed of critical enablers. But I also wanted to, number one, see if we could conduct an ESB and give something for our soldiers to strive for excellence. So I got some really positive feedback for that. So I'm here to say that in May of 2022, we're absolutely going to conduct a second iteration of the best squad competition in conjunction with a best warrior competition. Yeah. And in early May of 22, we'll be holding a separate expert soldier badge, first ever Army Reserve, in conjunction with the expert field medical badge competition at Fort McCoy, Wisconsin. And if you want to check out more about that, just look at the Army Reserve webpage, or you can check me out on Facebook and Instagram to get the details on that, or check with your chain of command, since the operations order has already been pushed out. So thanks.
Excellent. So I think the challenge is out there all across the Army now. Who's going to be the best squad leader and have the best squad in the Army?
And the biggest question we're all asking is the SMA going to do that for the regular Army? And I'm looking forward to see what that looks like.
I've heard something about that, but we'll have to get the SMA back on the show for him to confirm. I can't put that out anymore. Not in the job anymore, Sergeant Major. Can't do those things. Sergeant Major, going back out to our audience, Franklin C. writes in, he says, Sergeant Major Lombardo, please tell the audience why a young person considering joining the military should choose the Army Reserve. And additionally, why should a soldier leaving active duty choose to continue to serve in the Army Reserve? Great question, Sergeant.
It is a great question. I'm going to say at the outset, so all 3 components of the Army, a soldier should look at all 3. What I can say about the Army Reserve is we are the federal force, or the Federal Reserve of the Army. And I think what's unique about us is that every one of our military occupational specialties matches closely with a good civilian job, a high-paying civilian job. And I could take a look at one of our occupations, for example, like railroad operator. They only exist in the Army Reserve. Criminal Investigative Division agents. So if you're looking at career in law enforcement, maybe in investigations, as far as the reserve components, the large majority of them are in the Army Reserve. Medical professionals. Significant portion of the total Army's medical professionals reside, in fact, 50% reside in the Army Reserve. And some of the other reasons why you might want to consider the Army Reserve is just the leadership opportunities, the leadership training that you'll get, the ability to lead, the ability to be part of that team that you can lean on and get advice from. And also opportunities for advancement, opportunities for deployment, opportunities for full-time service, educational opportunities, healthcare benefits, life insurance, the list goes on. Check us out.
Well, you mentioned employment, Sergeant Major, and Jaffe R., our next person that wrote in, has got a question specific to that. And when I was Sergeant of the Army, I was always concerned about our Guard and Reserve soldiers and the amount that we operationalized them and used them in both in the state and federalized. And and the impact that has on their ability to both get a good job and maintain a good job with their employers throughout the country. And Jaffe R. mentions the People First initiatives. And what I think he's saying is, are there any initiatives to ensure that civilian employment, and how are you ensuring that they are employed or being educated for employment outside the military and still maintaining all their obligations? And additionally, he mentions the fact that so many of them are unemployed right now. So what is the People First Strategy Initiative for the Army Reserve doing to look at that specific issue?
Thanks, and thanks for the question. Let me see if I can unpack that, because that was quite a bit. So people are our number one priority, and what we're doing is we're reinvigorating our private-public partnership program, which is a nationwide network of businesses, members from academia, to make sure and partner. And these are employers that are willing to share talent with Army Reserve soldiers, and they're often in specialties that complement what we do, medical, so on and so forth. So we're looking to reinvigorate that through our 4 readiness divisions and other senior level commands around the nation. And in fact, there may be some former Command Sergeant Major of the Army Reserve that you may remember, Mike Schultz, that we recently brought on as a contractor to help spearhead this program, and along with Mrs. Alicia Grady, who's our director for the private-public partnership program. We're really looking forward to getting this reinvigorated to make sure that our soldiers have good civilian employment. We talked about that diamond. It's a critical influencer to making sure that that soldier can be successful in the duality of both their civilian careers and the military. So thanks for that.
Yeah. And a lot of those families were hard hit during the pandemic, not just soldiers, but all across the country. And
Yes.
It's good to hear that the Army Reserve and the National Guard is thinking about that and concerned about it on a regular basis. Sergeant Major, back out. And this is a response to the temporary promotion. I figured this question would come in. How about who's going to manage the rank reduction if a soldier does not fulfill his or her requirements after the 12-month temporary promotion? That's a great question. It's one I even have.
It is a great question. So unlike the regular Army, our promotions are not managed through Human Resources Command, with the exception of our cohort of Active Guard Reserve soldiers. So for the Active Guard Reserve soldiers who get temporary promotions, that will be managed through the Human Resources Command. For the troop program unit or the citizen soldier, those are going to be delegated or pushed down or through the 4 readiness divisions. So the promotion authority at the readiness division will be the authority to take that look 12 months later to make sure that the soldiers meet their obligations. But I'm going to just say at the outset, what we're really seeking is we're not looking to do that. We're looking to get you across that line, get you to graduate that school. We need junior non-commissioned officers in our organization to provide that excellent leadership experience that our soldiers need to grow the force. So what I ask our team to do is message to ensure that our soldiers have that reservation for NCOES, complete that, and maintain that promotion.
Excellent. And staying on that same topic, Sergeant Major, we got a question from Troy W., who I believe is Troy Welsh, retired Command Sergeant Major.
Gotcha.
And he asks, how many reserve seats for NCO schools does the Army Reserve receive each year? And are you experiencing a backlog in the Army Reserve?
Okay, so that's a good question. I don't have an exact number for how many seats that we need, but what we did do is before we initiated this policy, we took a look across the basic leader course, the master leader course, as well as our MOS-specific advanced and senior leader courses to ensure that we had enough seats to meet our promotion objectives, which are currently going to be to fill the ranks for sergeants, looking to go up to 90, 95% for some of the staff sergeants and sergeants first class. We're going to take a look and pause at 80% fill and see how far we can get from that point forward. But if I need more seats, I'll work with TRADOC, and TRADOC's already reached out to us, CSM Hendricks, to make sure that anybody that we temporarily promote, we can provide a seat for.
Excellent. And Sergeant Major, our next question comes in. It says, how about more senior non-commissioned officers? What can they expect to see in the weeks and months ahead for the Army Reserve?
Sure. So in order to grow my force, I need senior leaders, specifically at company. And what my concern is, and what I really want to do, is get first sergeants in a grade of E8 down to company level. So I'm looking at our manning guidance and how we promote and where we place our non-commissioned officers that get promoted to first sergeant. And I want them focused at that company level, which is where I think those initial that leader development occurs both not just with non-commissioned officers, but also by pairing with that company commander. That's a very important relationship that I want to harness, and I think that needs to be an E8 and not a sergeant first class. This current year, we've consolidated the management of senior non-commissioned officers in the rank of sergeant major and command sergeant major. And they're all being managed right now by the Senior Leader Development Office, as opposed to the Citizen Warriors being managed by them and the AGR being managed by HRC. I've laid out a guidance on what a typical career path for an SGM and CSM may look like, both at battalion, brigade, into the nominative ranks. So I challenge you, check out that policy, see where you stand, and take advantage of what your career path might look like. And I'm really excited to have to put that out there to let you know where you fit in our organization.
Absolutely. Sergeant Major, you mentioned a few times now growing the force. When
Yes.
you were here last time, we had a tough conversation about recruiting and retention.
Yes.
And we didn't quite make the mission last year. How did the Army Reserve do this year?
Yeah. So once again, and thanks for the question. And we're not going to shy away from these tough conversations,
Yep.
right? So we fell short of our mission this year as well. But there are some positive aspects, or we're doing well in certain respects. So with the recruiting mission, we fell short, but our retention mission is looking better than ever. And we actually sit pretty well in our force with both lieutenants and specialists. In fact, we have 10,000 more specialists than we have structure for. And we have over 1,200 more lieutenants than we have structures for. So what our challenge is actually growing our non-commissioned officers and our company grade officers. So speaking with General Daniels and doing the analysis, she took a terminology that she gets from business called a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. And this year, she laid down the gauntlet. And what we're getting after, and we want to go from a deficit of about 2,500 sergeants and about 800 captains to an overstrength of 3,000 sergeants and 800 captains by the time we transfer to the next command team in July of 2024. And some of the initiatives that we're talking about, like temporary promotions, looking at our selective reserve incentive program, taking a look at the reserve component career counselors and how we manage in our relationship with HRC and how we transition soldiers, and speaking at brigade, battalion, pre-command courses, and making sure that transitioning soldiers understand that America's Army Reserve is a good option for continued service as you pursue your civilian career. What we're doing with this BHAG is we're trying to energize our leaders to be part of the solution, to get rid of the red tape, to provide challenging opportunities for these specialists, and maybe to give them the nudge that they need to get promoted and become a non-commissioned officer, be invested in our organization, and give back. And I think we're looking really good to get there for this year.
Absolutely. I think that's an important message for leaders out there. You know, I had commanders and sergeant majors tell me all the time, when are you giving me sergeants? I said, last time I met, I remember, I think I hired you to build sergeants.
Right.
Right. So, and they got to get out there and build sergeants. And I would just also mention too, it is a challenge for the Army Reserve. You know, the Army, the active Army, has experienced phenomenal retention rates.
Yes.
And usually the Army Reserve counts on them to get a lot of their senior non-commissioned officers who are transitioning out of active into reserve positions.
Absolutely. Our structure is such that we need that transition, and frankly, we need the experience, and we want to retain that experience. If it's going to, if a regular Army soldier is going, looking to pursue their civilian career, we certainly want them to consider the things that I considered when I transitioned, and not taking a big leap and maybe a step out there. Consider that camaraderie, the team building, and just those challenges that you could only get through Army Reserve, and Army National Guard service.
Absolutely. And are there any incentives right now for an NCO leaving active duty to join the reserves?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Take a look at our incentives. Right now, they're very high. I don't know how long we're going to keep them up there, to be quite frankly, because you can get up to $20,000 to come over to the Army Reserve right now. So I would say check with your transition center if that's what you're considering. And also check out some of the unique military occupational specialties that we have.
for $20,000, I might re-enlist for the Army Reserve, Sergeant Major. That sounds like a pretty good incentive to me. Sergeant Major, going back out to our audience, some great questions. And just remind the audience, and thank you for sending questions today. We will not have time to get to all of them, but I promise you, Sergeant Major will see all of the questions that are sent in. Joe B, and I'm assuming Joe B may either be or be affiliated with the Army Reserve Ambassador, something I'm very passionate about because my high school principal, who helped me get in the Army, was an Army Reserve Ambassador. And he asked, how can you assist Army Reserve Ambassadors?
How could I assist Army Reserve Ambassadors? So I have the fortune that General Daniels has me going out observing training year out. I spent 181 days on TDY this year, observing troops all across the nation, from Yakima River, doing water gap crossings, all the way to ASA Dix, doing medical operations. So when I go out, I link up with the local ambassador, let him know what initiatives that the Army Reserve is looking at, and asking them to help us communicate with their state and local officials. The other thing I ask too is I have an open door. And if you're an ambassador out there and you're getting feedback from soldiers in the field, or if they're experiencing challenges, if I could get through the red tape, and if you and I can connect, absolutely get through the red tape. Let's get them to get that great experience that's going to retain them.
Joe B also mentioned in that question too about Minuteman scholarships. Sergeant Major, can you tell us about those?
I certainly can. So Minuteman scholarships are incredibly unique. And what it does is it gives a drilling Army Reserve soldier that may be pursuing an education an opportunity for advancement into the commissioned officer ranks. And what you would do is you would petition or get a recommendation through your NCO support channel, or even your chain of command, to your 2-star level headquarters, or 2-star level general, or even an introduction to an Army Reserve ambassador. Tell them what you do for the team, explain to them what you're pursuing as an education and why that would benefit the Army Reserve. And potentially they could offer you either a 3 or a 4-year scholarship paid while maintaining Army Reserve affiliation, that by the end of your education, you become a lieutenant or a commissioned officer in the United States Army Reserve.
Thanks, Sergeant Major. Our next question is from Vincent L. And I think another great question, but I'm going to summarize Vincent's question. What he asks is, can you talk about some of the specific MOSs that are unique to the United States Army Reserve, or maybe more prominent in the Army Reserve, that are key assets, things like cyber, IT, and medical soldiers? And I know you mentioned medical earlier.
Absolutely. Yeah, so there are some very unique medical MOSs. I mentioned earlier CID. So for the reserve components in the comparison, the large majority of the CID agents are in the Army Reserve. There's a couple of prime power engineer MOSs that are unique in the Army Reserve.
By the way, incredible individuals when you're building FOBs in Iraq.
Yes.
I was on those guys all the time, asking for help every single day.
Right.
Air conditioning will make you the most popular first sergeant on the FOB if you can get that up and running.
One of my favorite ones, and there's not too many of them, and it's actually unique to the Army Reserve in general, is these 88 uniforms or train operators that we have. They make some pretty great comparisons with civilian jobs, where it's CSX, Amtrak, or whatever. These are locomotive engineers. Absolutely unique to our component. Pretty interesting.
Fully licensed to drive locomotives.
Fully licensed to drive locomotives. And not many people know, but the Army Reserve has significant aviation assets. And most of them are warrant officer pilots, both fixed wing and rotary wing. In fact, we have right now, General Daniels is down in Fort Hood, Texas, North Fort Hood, and we're deploying the largest, or the 11th Aviation Brigade is going on in deployment, which is making Army Reserve aviation history. It's the largest aviation element we've ever deployed. So that's something to consider too, and it pairs well with the civilian career. So, and we're always in need of aviators. So that's another MOS that we have a significant amount of as well.
Well, thanks, Sergeant Major. And that's a great rundown of some of the incredible assets the Army Reserve provides for the U.S. Army. Our next question, Sergeant Major, comes from Alex R. And he asks, are the numbers for First Sergeant AGR positions projected to grow and also become, I think, immaterial, is what he's asking.
Okay, that's a good question.
It's probably a good guess that he's probably a master sergeant looking for a first sergeant.
I'm thinking he is. So we're challenged by structure, and we have about 16,000 of our 200,000 soldiers and civilians are part of the AGR program, and they provide critical support to the team, specifically by ensuring continuity between battle assemblies. And that's primarily how the AGR program helps the Army Reserve. And there are some select leadership positions in the recruiting command at some of the garrisons that we have and at the 3 non-commissioned officer academies. So I can say what initiative, I'm very cognizant about giving leadership opportunities to this full-time force because they need it for career and development. So what I'm looking at is where I have shortages, where I could have a what we call CTAP. It's a career leadership program specifically for the AGR cohort. So where I may have some shortages in those senior ranks for a one-time occasional tour I will assume some risk and place them in that based upon the recommendation of the senior non-commissioned officer of that 2-star level command. So there's a policy out on that. I challenge you to take a look at it. Give me some feedback on that. Tell me what you think. And if you're interested in that opportunity, we're currently looking to slate some AGRs in some troop program unit billets as we speak, just as a pilot to see how that pans out.
And a similar follow-up question to that same question, Sergeant Major, from Jason D. says, how are you incentivizing people to take these first sergeant jobs? I know, and unfortunately, to tell the truth, I had challenging sometimes master sergeants wanting to take first sergeant jobs. You know, it's the same amount of pay, but a lot different job being a first sergeant. So how is the Army Reserve incentivizing people to be in these first sergeant positions?
Yeah, so, you know, we're developing our policies and procedures to look at this, but I'll just tell you my philosophy. You know, if you want to get promoted to sergeant major, you have to do time as a first sergeant. So I'm looking at how we give board guidance in our promotion policies, and so take that challenge. It's probably one of the most it's one of the most rewarding experiences that you'll look back on and thank yourself for doing it. I'm also making sure that we don't double slot master sergeants in positions. So that's going to level out my force and create a level of competition. So I think by creating competition in order to get that promotion to sergeant major, I think that'll incentivize it.
Absolutely. I've always said too, Sergeant Major, the best sergeant majors were first sergeants twice.
Yeah.
That's right. So let's go back out to our questions. Sergeant Major, our next question is, Sergeant Major, what would you say to a senior NCO who struggles with civilian work and military work balance, who's considering leaving the military reserves to focus on his or her civilian job? And I'm sure this comes up quite a bit.
Yes.
What kind of advice could you give those soldiers?
Yeah, I fully recognize that. And I've experienced the challenge myself. And I understand that people go through phases. And General Daniels and I are looking at transparency or portability between components. So if you're a soldier that's struggling to maintain that balance, I'd say the first thing to do is talk to your chain of command to see what we could do to stabilize that. And we're pushing the message out. Number one is not to change the training schedules because that causes friction with your civilian employer and also with your family. You know, we're looking at portability and that could be either moving from the operational force to the generating force. We relooked the amount of days that you're doing for annual training, and we could take a look at moving you from a unit that has to be more ready to one that's less ready. We have a very flexible rescheduling policy. So if a soldier can't make a particular weekend, the commanders and first sergeants will work with them to see when they are available to perform, you know, duty. Although we want you there when that unit is together, because what we really want to get at is after that individual and collective training, we still have opportunities during the month where we always have things to do. And finally, if you can't, we fully recognize that you may need to take a couple of years in the inactive, you know, ready reserve or individual ready reserve, and maybe look forward to coming back once your family situation changes. But at the end of the day, we want to keep you a soldier for life, and we want to keep you throughout your military career so you're able to, number one, give back to our force and you know, be successful at both careers.
Well, thank you, Sergeant Major. Our next question, Sergeant Major, is from Derek W. He says, Sergeant Major Lombardo, I'm sorry.
That's all right. It's all good.
What would you say to soldiers who are on the fence about receiving the COVID vaccination?
Right. So it's Guy, not Vince, right? It's often confused.
This question has to come up, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Sure. Put me under pressure. So I think the question is if they were nervous about getting it.
Yeah.
So, right.
They're on the fence about it.
On the fence about it.
Mm-hmm.
So What I will say is the COVID-19 shot is FDA approved. It's also a requirement for continued military service. In fact, the deadline is June of 2022 to get your COVID shot, but General Daniels and I have a more aggressive goal, and we want you to get it sooner. We don't want to wait till June. All right, and it goes after protection of the force. But if you have a concern, and you may, what I ask you to do is, number one, is understand the policy. All right, and there are administrative and medical exemptions that you could apply for if you qualify for them. And the other thing I ask you to do is we have plenty of medical personnel, and talk to your doctor, speak to Army Reserve doctors, get the best medical advice you can, and make a decision that's right for you. And that's really what I would tell you. And be comfortable with the decision that you make. Yeah, yes, and the military has those vaccinations throughout Desert Storm, the glomulin, anthrax. We need to make sure that our force is ready to do the mission that we need to do if called upon.
Absolutely.
And COVID-19 is going to be one of those requirements that we have to do.
Yeah, and it's just like defending the nation. This is their part soldiers take in keeping this nation safe, whether that be on the front lines of a battlefield or invisible enemy here back in America.
Right.
But I think you made important points, Sergeant Major. Soldiers have always had to have vaccinations. This is nothing new.
Right.
New pandemic, new illness, but it affects and unfortunately took the lives of millions of people.
Yes.
Sergeant Major Backout, I think this is more of a comment, but if you could comment on the comment, I think it would be good because it's a great subject. He said, your ideas on how soldiers with limited available duty days, now this is from Don R., beyond training assemblies and annual training can maximize the opportunities for soldiers. Go Army, he says. So what I think he's talking about is limited available duty days beyond training and giving them opportunities to work outside of their Army Reserve job. Is that what he's referring to?
I'm not sure, but what I can say is that while we train 39 days a year, 14 days of statutory AT, and 24 days of individual duty training, you could look, we have plenty of opportunities, and the Army's always looking for some extra help, whether that's on tour of duty, whether that's additional duty operational support, whether either with the reserve components or with the active duty. So there are additional opportunities if you're seeking to do more reserve duty. And MOBCAP is the process in where you would look for those opportunities.
Excellent. And looks like we have time for about one more question, Sergeant Major. And I want to thank our audience today for the incredible questions you've been writing in. Our last question is from Michael L. He says, Command Sergeant Major, and I think this is very important. Can you speak to any future plans for the medical readiness program for TPU soldiers? This has been a topic of discussion for a long time about medical care for both the Guard and the Reserve. So are there any future plans for TPU soldier medical requirement changes? Sure.
So that's a broad question, but I appreciate it. So we contract right now, Logistic Health is our contractor for medical readiness. And our current requirement is to have a medical review and a dental review every year. So what I can say is that the team up at Fort Belvoir are relooking the contract. My understanding is we're looking at a new contract coming into spring. And that may, and I'm not going to commit to it, but what we're looking into is why do you have to go in person for a medical assessment? And maybe we can get with the technology and build into a contract telemed, perhaps, except for the mandatory requirements. So that might be something that you may see. I don't want to get over my skis on this, but that's something that you may see coming in the future. And then, the frequency of when you have to do that. Should that be every year, or could it be every other year? Now, what's critical is that we need to maintain the medical readiness and the dental readiness of our force, because again, we exist for one reason, that's to win the nation's wars. And when the nation calls on the Army Reserve will be ready to do what the Army and the nation asks of us. So I would say take a look in the spring as we roll out our new contract and see what that entails.
Well, Sergeant Major, again, thanks for your time. And our audience, thank you for your participation today. Sergeant Major and the entire Army Reserve, incredibly busy. You gave us time today. We hope we're going to have you back again next year for another year in review. Before I go to closing, Sergeant Major, any closing comments?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to thank AUSA for everything that they do for all components of the Army, but specifically today for giving me an opportunity to talk to our Army Reserve soldiers about our new initiatives. I look forward to coming back here for perhaps the third iteration in 22. So thanks again, Dan. I really appreciate it.
And hopefully you'll bring better news about Army football the next time you come back.
100%. Army football. Yeah, go Army, beat Navy, 2022.
2022. Excellent. Thank you. And I want to thank Sergeant Lombardo for giving us the opportunity for this insightful conversation. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, USAA. We simply cannot do these events without the tremendous support from our sponsors, and USAA has been there for us. I also want to inform our audience of some upcoming events. Of course, you can always see what's up next at AUSA.org, but a few I'd like to highlight. Mark your calendars, ladies and gentlemen, for Coffee with the Chief on 20 January at the United States Army Museum. You can register for that very soon on AUSA.org. Up next after that in February is Coffee with the Sergeant Major of the Army here at the AUSA headquarters in Arlington, Virginia. Mark your calendars for 9 February. And of course, 29 through 31, mark your calendars for Global Force. Global Force down in Huntsville, Alabama. And make sure you go to AUSA.org to register. To register for these and all of the other events, I'd also like to remind all visitors and all of our virtual participants today that AUSA membership matters. Consider being a member. If you are, thank you. And if you need to renew or join today, go to AUSA.org to join or find out how to be a member or the incredible benefits that membership to AUSA does. Thank you again for your attendance and have a great day.